By the 1900s, humans had conquered land and sea. We had cars, bicycles, boats, and barges. The only frontier left to conquer was the hardest, the sky. On December 17, 1903, in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, the Wright brothers successfully flew the first controlled powered aircraft in the history of the world. On that day, they defied the barriers of glider flight, marked the beginning of modern aviation, brought out the possibilities of flight back into the public eye, and changed the ways we wage wars. The Wright brothers were also two humble, smart men who used their resources, knowledge, and time to break through the frontier of the sky in order to accomplish what they had always dreamed of: powered flight. As a result of the successful controlled powered flight, aviation was revived in Europe and America. There was substantial advancement in knowledge of aircraft control, and it made World Wars I and II far more deadly to not only soldiers but also civilians.
Wilbur and Orville Wright were born in Dayton, Ohio, to Susan and Bishop Wright. Even as children, the brothers were inventing. When they were little, they were given a toy helicopter that they studied, modified, and then attempted to fly. Not only did this demonstrate their innate mechanical skills, it birthed a dream in the brothers, a dream to fly. In 1892, when the brothers were in their 20s, they opened up a bicycle shop. There, they fixed and designed bicycles to sell. Here it was they got most of their practice in mechanics that would help them with their later endeavors in flight. The shop's earnings also supplied them with the needed fundings for their flight. In 1896, Orville got typhoid fever. For 6 weeks, Wilbur tended to his sick brother. During this time, Wilbur read about the death of Otto Lienthal. Otto Lienthal was a German engineer who designed and tested gliders. His death relit the brothers' lost childhood dream of flying. In a letter to the Smithsonian in 1899, Wilbur said, quote,
"I have been interested in the problem of mechanical and human flight ever since I was a boy."
Wilbur dug into Lienthal's writings and designs. As Orville got better, the brothers started conducting research into birds, flying, and gliders. Their biggest inspiration was Lilienthal. The brothers took inspiration from his gliding successes and failures. They realized that while people were focused on getting crafts into the air, they didn't have a way to control them once they got there. In 1899, the brothers began building their first glider. They contacted the U.S. Weather Bureau to inquire about a location to do their testing. After a series of letters between the two parties, Joseph Dotcher of the Weather Bureau wrote on August 18, 1900, regarding Kitty Hawk, North Carolina.
"To the fitness of Kitty Hawk as a place to practice or experiment with a flying machine. This, in my opinion, would be a fine place. Our winds are always steady, generally from 10 to 20 miles velocity per hour."
Based on this information, the brothers chose Kitty Hawk. In September and October of 1990, they completed kite and glider testing there. In July and August of 1901, they returned to Kitty Hawk with a bigger glider and completed more testing. They tested around 100 flights, ranging from 20 to 400 feet. The amount of time they spent practicing their flying and control skills was critical. By this time, the brothers realized that much of the data from Otto Lienthal's glides was faulty. In the winter of 1901, they built the first wind tunnel and began rigorous, thorough testing to gather their own new data for their next glider. In a letter to his father, Wilbur states that,
"My machine will be much stronger than that of Lilienthal. My machine is more simple in construction and of greater control than previous machines."
In August of 1902, they went to Kitty Hawk once more with another glider and the data from their wind tunnel. This time, after much testing, they achieved their longest flight yet of 622.5 feet. By 1903, the Wright brothers were finally ready to try control-powered flight. First, though, they would need a motor. It would need to be powerful enough to carry the plane and the driver's weight, but light enough it wouldn't add too much extra weight. They reached out to manufacturers, but none of them could supply a light enough motor that was still powerful enough for their purposes. They decided then to make a motor themselves. Charlie Taylor, their employee, produced a motor for them in just 6 weeks. The brothers got back to Kitty Hawk in early fall, but they didn't try to fly till December as they encountered weather and technical issues. Wilbur wrote to his family on December 14th, quote,
"There is now no question of final success."
On December 17, 1903, after a coin toss, Orville was chosen to be the one flying. The winds were blowing around 20 to 27 miles per hour. They positioned the plane at the end of their launch track and let the engine warm up. Then, at 10:35 a.m., Orville took off the restraining rope and the plane went forward down the track. The craft lifted into the air and Orville took flight. The flight lasted 12 seconds long and Orville traveled 120 feet. "Were you scared?" Wilbur asked Orville afterwards. "Scared," Orville replied with a smile. "There wasn't time." After their first flight, they did 3 more test flights, the furthest of which went a distance of 852 feet. After the 4th flight, a gust of wind picked up their machine and smashed it to pieces on the ground. They ended that day with 4 successful flights and left Kitty Hawk after they sent a telegram to their father reading,
Success. 4 flights Thursday morning, all against 21-mile wind, started from level with engine power alone. Average speed brought air 31 miles, longest 57 seconds, informed press, home for Christmas.
Though the brothers had finally conquered the frontier of the sky, the news about the brothers' accomplishment didn't make them famous overnight. After Bishop Wright showed his son's telegram to Frank Tucson of the Associated Press, Mr. Tucson said,
57 seconds, eh? If it had been 57 minutes, then it might have been a news item.
Other papers, however, did report on what happened, but their reports weren't accurate. For example, the Virginian pilot wrote,
Flying machine soars 3 miles in teeth of high wind over sand hills and waves at Kitty Hawk.
Even with the many articles, people still didn't really believe the brothers' success was real, or something more than one-time luck. This never seemed to bother the brothers, and they never rushed to prove anyone wrong. In the years after the December 17th flight, the brothers improved on their designs enough that they believed they were ready to sell them. In 1908, Wilbur went to France to do demonstrations. At Le Mans, he broke almost every flying record multiple times and finally brought the brothers into the limelight. In the US, Orville would eventually do the same at Fort Myer. The brothers had other demonstrations elsewhere in Europe and one in New York that drew crowds of thousands to see their wonder of engineering. The Wrights relit the flame of aviation in Europe and America. Many previous aviators had failed or died in their quest to fly, leaving most to believe that aviation was impossible. On December 17th, the Wright brothers defied that notion and inspired more flight pioneers to follow in their footsteps. Just a couple of decades after their flight, Charles A. Lindbergh became the first man to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean in 1927. And a few decades after that, Jacqueline Cochran became the first female to fly faster than the speed of sound in 1953.
The great American journey that began at Kitty Hawk continues in ways unimaginable to the Wright brothers.
Just a few years after the brothers' successful flight, their powered aircrafts were put to use. Throughout World War I, beginning in 1914, airplanes were used for air reconnaissance and bombings. German planes bombed civilian targets in London, Edinburgh, and other locations throughout Europe. Other countries, such as the United Kingdom and France, also bombed cities filled with civilians during the war. John Gutman, a historian of military aircrafts, said that at the end of World War I, it was indisputable that planes were the weapon of the future. The Wrights' flight changed modern warfare and made it far deadlier for everyone, killing thousands of soldiers and civilians. The brothers also engineered and tested many essentials of aviation that still give flight to modern aircraft today. They discovered that there would be a loss of lifting power if one wing was placed above the other, leading them to invent the wing warping technique, which was an early system for lateral control of their aircraft. Also, they invented the hip cradle, a way to steer an aircraft by leaning left or right. These types of control systems are still used in modern aircrafts today. Today, aviators, militaries, scientists, and civilians look back at that day in December 1903 when the Wright brothers flew. They recognize them as two men who embodied the American ideal. On that day, they completed what was thought to be impossible with very little help. They funded their own experiments with money earned from their shop, they made their own studies to collect their data, and they designed almost everything themselves. The world would not be the same without their flight. They defied the frontier of glider flight, marked the beginning of modern aviation, brought the possibilities of flight back into the public eye, and changed the ways we engage in wars. After their first flight, Orville wrote a letter to a friend remarking their success.
Isn't it astounding that all these secrets have been preserved for so many years, just so we could discover them?